Can I be heard? Yes. Loud and clear. Okay, so I am absolutely delighted to be back in Boulder in in fact, my favorite venue, this lovely Canyon Theatre, with two dear friends from what hyphenated identities, as he mentioned in his poem today, Amit Majmudar and Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. The theme of the session is the way of the goddess. We are narrowing down to two Indian goddesses to look at what the way of the goddess might mean, where it might take us. But we will expand the conversation a little further and hope that all of you will bring in other aspects of the sacred feminine. They are both American citizens with their roots deep in India. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni is an award-winning, best-selling. Best-selling is right because from her last session till now, she was signing books and hasn't got any lunch yet.
Yeah, actually, kind people took me away and gave me food to eat.
So Chitra Banerjee
was very good.
Divakaruni, she's also a poet, activist, and teaches writing. Her latest novel, The Forest of Enchantment, looks at the life of the Indian goddess Sita from a woman's perspective. Several of her works have been made into films and plays, and she, of course, does the creative writing program at the University of Houston, and she came to the US in 1976. But more on that later, on where the goddess followed her. Amit Majmudar, as you may have gathered in the morning, those of you who heard his brilliant poem, is a diagnostic nuclear radiologist who lives in Ohio with his wife, 3 children. He writes fiction and poetry, but today we are talking about his work around Indian myth, in particular his rendition of Sitayan, the story of the goddess Sita, born of the Earth Mother. I too have worked on Sita, and I've co-edited an anthology years ago, which became a sort of a key work for people looking for research on Sita, and that has very unconventional interpretations of her role. And as a counterpoint, almost an alter ego of Sita is Radha. Now I'm going to get rid of my notes and try to explain to those of you who may not understand the ways of Indian goddesses. The feminine, sacred, has always been written out of religions carefully and consistently. The Greeks in the beginning had 6 gods and 6 goddesses in their pantheon. And then after that, one by one, it began with Hestia, the goddess of the household and the hearth. And then bit by bit, they got replaced by alpha male gods. And some not such, but it became a male pantheon. India and the Hindu religion, for the time being, I don't know how long it'll continue in this spirit, has somehow retained the sense of the goddesses as being as strong and as powerful as the gods. And they are not just the consorts of the gods, but they are powerful figures in their own right. They have 2 aspects. They are the Ugra and the Shant, that is the calm, beneficial ones who give blessings, and the angry ones, which also give a different sort of blessing. Now, I don't, when I talk about the feminine and the sacred feminine, I don't only look at the biology of a woman and a woman goddess and whatever her biology may be. I also look at the sense that all of us carry some of the male and some of the feminine qualities within us. So, I mean, many of you in the audience who are not women will certainly be carrying something of the goddess within you. And so to begin with, if that is sounding too complicated, let me tell you the story of Sita and Radha. And why these two people, having spent the formative part of their lives in America, have returned to these stories, was told thousands of years ago in a different culture and a faraway continent. So I'm going to give you the bare outlines of Sita's story, and then I'm going to read out a little passage from my book on Radha, so you can see these two goddesses and their very different paths and well, you could say ideologies. The goddess Sita. And a beautiful film has been made by Nina Paley, I think, on Sita here in America.
Sita sings the blues.
And I wish I had got that for you to hear, but it would have distracted from this. The broad lines of the story are as follows. Sita, the daughter of the earth, followed her beloved husband, Lord Rama, into exile and spent 14 years with him, roaming the forest. She was abducted by Ravana, the demon king of Sri Lanka, but her chastity remained intact as Ravana sought to seduce rather than violate her. A fierce battle ensued in which Sita's husband, Lord Rama, King Rama, was victorious. However, before she returned home, she was made to undergo a test by fire to prove her purity. Later, after being anointed queen, she was again subjected to suspicion by her husband and some citizens, sent into a second exile, during which she gave birth to 2 sons, very important, 2 sons, not 2 daughters. Her husband demanded another test by fire, which she both accepted and rejected, in that, after having established her chastity and her purity once again, she returned into the womb of the earth, unable to accept the indignities heaped upon her. The fundamentals of this story for me involve the asymmetry of moral standards and judgment for men and women, gods and goddesses. So here you have Sita, the product, although she is the earth goddess, is the product of an intensely patriarchal society and interpreted through those lenses. And later, because the big difference between Indian myth and myth anywhere else in the world is that we accept it as fluid and we rewrite it every single day. It's open to reinterpretation and there's rarely any fixed text. My Sita book came out a long time ago. This is Radha. And the title of this is Finding Radha, the Quest for Love. Now, it may be almost impossible to explain to an audience here, which is not only South Asian, many of you are from different cultures and different backgrounds. So I'd like to ask how many in the audience have heard of Radha? Oh, okay. So I don't have to explain this to you. So I'm so delighted. But let me explain that Radha is, the Hindu purists now get a bit embarrassed by Radha, and this was a very subversive anthology that I published, because Radha is possibly the only goddess in the world who is not married or what do you say, legal?
Well, she's married to someone else.
She's married to someone else. She's in an adulterous relationship with Lord Krishna. And she's also older than him by several years. But yet, every temple in India will mention Radha Krishna. Her name comes before his. And there's a reason for this, because what she represents is really the enigma of her being worshipped the way she is because she represents a higher level of mysticism, which is away from the gradations of social approval and of the human heart and of the sacred heart, and her love for the God being a little beyond her immediate circumstances. So I'm just going to read out a little passage to give you a sense of this. It's from my introduction to the book, and I'll switch out the bits that I went to this old temple in Vrindavan, and which is where the Lord Krishna and his beloved Radha met and are supposed to still meet every night. There's a building there where they supposedly consummate their love again and again and again. So how did Radha come to me? Perhaps it was when I was roaming the narrow lanes of Vrindavan in search of those elusive mysteries. Amidst the groves of ancient basil bushes stood a room with a bed in it, designed in the style of a government guest house in a minor Mufassal town. It had iron shutters through which I could glimpse the postered bed. It was here that they met, those two, in a timeless nocturne through the yugas across the ages. And then The attendant priest handed me a bundle of prasad. The packet he gave me contained some sweet crumbling pedas, tulsi leaves, a folding mirror, some bindis, glass bangles, a bottle of cheap fluorescent pink nail polish. The last three items contained a traditional suhaka putara, a gift symbolizing the auspicious feminine. It was a moment of illumination. The importance of it, the crucial nuance came to me in a flash. The mirror was a gateway to the recognition of selfhood. The bangles were a form of armor. I don't wear bindis, but they represent the awakening of the third, the inner eye. But it was the nail polish that moved me the most. It spoke to me of hopes and yearnings and betrayals, the entire tradition of Shringar Ras, the evocation of the mood of romantic and erotic love from the Natya Shastra, that is such a deep undercurrent of Indian culture. So the conversation today will be about these two goddesses and their very different trajectories. We concentrate on Sita because both their recent works are on Sita, but I'd like to bring in the counterpoint of Radha. We'll begin with Amit.
Sure. And so, first of all, thank you for having me out here, and thank you all for coming out here. Apropos of what you said earlier about the male containing an element of the female and the female containing an element of the male, as a physician, it makes perfect sense because remember, men are XY, women are XX. We share an entire chromosome. And so that's it's a literally true thing that Namita just said. And as far as Radha and Sita are concerned, I think it's a wonderful juxtaposition because traditionally, Sita is the very obedient and traditional, proper, that's her figure. And then the paradigm of Radha is of an adulteress, an older woman, and there's full of joy, full of the joy of sex, right? Full of love and passion. And what I find interesting is the way in which either one of those goddesses reflects and mirrors their corresponding male components. So Rama, and for those of you not familiar with the story of the Ramayana, I urge you to read about it because it's one of the best stories ever created. Rama is a very rule-bound individual. And so there's the exile of Sita that is she's unjustly exiled at the end, but that mirrors an exile of Rama himself, which is believed by most of us to be unjust because it's the result of a palace intrigue. But Ram goes along with it. He does not disobey his father when his father says go into the forest. He does not complain, he just does it because he's very rule-bound. And even at the end when he exiles his wife, in a sense, he's doing it because he wants to honor his dharma as a king, and he has to do what's right for a king. This is a bad, PR move to have my wife here. She's a subject of suspicion. I'm going to send her out. It hurts me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Now, Krishna. Krishna is a rule breaker. In the Mahabharata, which is an additional story that you should get into, because it's a wonderful story. It's a real epic.
My version of the Mahabharata is for sale in the bookstore.
There you go. Now you know where to start. So the Kauravas are the bad guys, quote unquote. It's more complex than that, but they're the ones that Krishna's on the other side, technically. He doesn't fight for the Pandavas, but he is their ally. And at the end, there are these three really powerful Kaurava warriors. Bhishma Pitama, Karna, who is said to be the equal of Arjuna, and Duryodhana. They're the big three. And Krishna himself never takes up arms, but he is the one who tells each one of the warriors when it's time, when they have an opportunity to kill each one of those warriors, he tells them to break the laws of chivalry, break the laws of war, and basically do really, really underhanded things to take those guys out. And the warriors who actually end up doing it, they say, Krishna, I can't do that. That's kind of underhanded. But he says, no, it's right, do it. He smiles a mysterious smile. He says, just do it, trust me. And in the same way, in order to attain that higher purpose, that higher goal, that higher element, he's willing to transgress traditional laws. Radha, in the same way, in order to attain that higher unity with the divine, is willing to transgress social norms and customs. And that's how each one of those goddesses reflect the god of whom they are the counterpart.
Absolutely. That was beautiful and very inspirational. And I'm sure on the streets of Boulder, we will encounter many Radhas and many Sitas and recognize the essence of them. Would you like perhaps to read a short passage
Could
from
I
your...
could I just say
Yes,
something
please,
before
I'm sorry.
that, which is that I really liked what both of you said, but I want to complicate it a little bit, saying this is the general understanding of Ram and Sita and Krishna and Radha, but I've just started getting into Radha's story. In fact, I was just telling Namita, when I was writing the Ramayana, my Forest of Enchantments, I was very inspired by In Search of Sita. And then I got a copy of her Radha book. And I was like, maybe I will write a novel on Radha. But she warned me someone else is already writing it. So now I have to look for other pastures. But that is true in general of the way in which the Ramayana has been interpreted. But if you go back into Ramayana traditions, there are traditions of love where Rama is the hero and Sita is the heroine, and it's very similar to Krishna and Radha. There's Shringar, there's a lot of mention of the joys of the body as being in sync with the joys of the soul. So we want to remember that.
Do you want to read the passage where they meet? Which of you is going to...
I
No,
was
he's going to read
yeah.
that. But I just wanted to say also that what you said about Sita being very proper, that's not in the original Ramayana, right? That's not in Valmiki. She is much more assertive in Valmiki. Ram doesn't ask her for the first Agni Pariksha. She says, I'm going to jump into the fire because you're not going to tell me what to do. So I just want to say that the interpretations...
The multiplicity of interpretations.
Yes.
If I can break into a funny story here.
Yes.
The folk traditions are completely different from the classical traditions in India. And in the folk tradition, still, people from the west of India are considered from the place of Sita's birth. They don't welcome them. So I was on a stage in Patna, which is the place where Sita was born nearby in Sita Mari, and there was somebody who was actually from the royal family of Ayodhya, and they booed him off the stage. They said, you treated our Sita badly, get off the stage. So these ancient fights continue.
Yes.
As, interpretations.
It's just wonderfully complex, and so many interpretations are possible. I think that's what's enriching and delightful about our
And we
texts.
continue that to this day, right? We continue having conflicting interpretations, conflicting tellings. We rewrite it. Another person rewrites it. There's another person working on a Radha novel. That doesn't mean that you can't write a Radha novel as well, right? Because it's an open field. It's an open field. And so the part I'm going to read is from very early in the epic, and it's when Sita is basically, I'll give you the quick backstory. There's this enormous bow. It's called the bow of Shiva, and it's made out of this mysterious metal, and it's charmed, and it's divine, and nobody can lift it except Sita. When she's a little girl, she just kind of like plays, and she plays it like rides horsey on it, right? Because she's magical, right? And so then her dad says, the only guy who's ever going to marry you has to be able to string that bow. And so there's this big event that takes place in the palace. And all the kings who want to marry Sita, all the princes who want to marry Sita, they all come, and they're all going to try and lift this bow and put a string across it. And this is Sita, and it's from Sita's perspective, and she's sitting next to her sister Urmila. And Urmila will go on to marry Lakshman, and Sita, the brother of Rama, and Rama himself is now going to give his attempt at stringing the bow, and this is the first time that she's going to see him. Okay. My sister Urmila and I had a hard time holding back our laughter. Our seats faced the bow. The most powerful men in all of India squatted and strained in front of us, bug-eyed and pink-faced. It looked like a constipation epidemic. I maintained a solemn silence, no matter how often Urmila nudged me and commented on this one's back hair or that one's belly. The rose garland rested on my lap. When the Raja of Vatsa pulled so hard at the bow, he crossed his eyes and let out a squeak of gas. The whole hall burst into guffaws, and I didn't hold back a smile. The event was almost over, and I was all set to be an old maid when a boy, roughly my age, stepped out of the crowd. His long hair was tied in a top knot, and he wore the loose, dusty cotton of a soldier in training. "Who's that?" my sister wondered under her breath. My fingers tightened reflexively on the garland, drawing it ever so slightly up, and the roses reddened and surged scent. A spry old Brahmin, Vishwamitra, the boy's guru, strode up beside the boy who had no herald to announce him. The Brahmin's booming voice answered my sister's question. "Prince Rama of Ayodhya." He had the walk of one of the slighter, sleeker big cats. Not the lion, who has something drowsy about him even when he's stalking. And not the Bengal tiger, who sheds his bulkiness only when he charges. Rather the panther, whose steps are lighter and whose gaze combines threat and interiority. He approached the bow, and unlike every other suitor, he joined his hands and lowered his head. I saw his lips move. He was praying. Urmila grabbed my elbow. "Sita," she whispered urgently, "he has a brother." Lakshman, that's Rama's brother, as abuzz as his older brother was serene, had just pushed his way through to Vishwamitra's side. I knew my sister well enough. Urmila had already jumped ahead in her imagination to a double wedding. I kept my attention on the present and on Rama. Nothing in 3 worlds interested me more than his kneeling body, his softly moving lips, the tender hand with which he stroked the bow. He was calming an unbroken horse the moment before he meant to mount. With a swift movement, entirely unexpected of the left hand, he grabbed the curved crest of the bow as though surprising a flared cobra and stood up. The bow rushed upright and stood at attention behind him, shrinking in his shadow, unless he had grown in height. Urmila gave a small shout of delight and surprise, and Lakshman across the hall shouted, "Yes!" with his fist in the air. I saw from the corner of my eye my sister and Rama's brother locking eyes. The garland seemed to multiply its roses in my lap. The rest of the audience, envious, kept mum. I kept quiet too, but my lips had spread apart and my breath was coming fast. Rama swept the bowstring to the top of the bow and tried to knot it with his dexterous hand. The bow struggled against him in its pride, straightening, so he forced it into a C, his back muscles flexing under the slash of the sash. I, the trophy, hoped hard to win him as my winner. I rose to my feet as he braced himself and pulled down. His right hand finished the knot and came away, but his left hand didn't ease up on the bow. Maybe he gave it one last pulse of force to test its metal. A thunderclap struck the assembly hall. My eyes shut reflexively, and when I opened them, my ears were ringing. Rama stood with his hands at his sides, facing me, his top knot blown loose and his long black hair streaming over his shoulders. He had snapped the bow in half. Thank you.
So that is the beginning of their love story. I'm going to move all the way to the end of their love story. And so it is going to be a different mood and a different mode. But that is also very true of the epic, which moves into many worlds, into many ways of love, both the positive and the negative, both the ecstatic and the tragic. So this is a moment when all of the things we heard about, most of them have been done. Sita has been rescued after the trial by fire, where she jumps into the fire and the god of fire brings her out and says she is innocent. She has come. There's been a wonderful coronation of Rama and Sita. Sita is now expecting babies. She is very happy. And she says to Ram, she says, you know, the happiest times in my life were the years when I spent them in the forest with you. That was like an extended love story, an extended honeymoon. I would love to go to the forest again before I become busy with the duties of motherhood. And Ram says, certainly, Lakshman will take you. So Sita is very happy, and she is going to the forest with Lakshman, and she turns and looks at Lakshman, and she sees something she's never seen before. Lakshman is weeping. And Sita is shocked, and she says, why are you weeping? And he says, it's because I've been ordered to leave you in the forest. And she doesn't understand. She says, sure, I'm here for like a week to spend time in Valmiki's ashram, get a little R&R. He says, no, you're not going back to Ayodhya. And he explains to her, it's because people have been whispering. They've said you were in Ravan's palace for a year. Can they really trust your purity? They've heard that the god of fire came and proclaimed your innocence, but that was somewhere else. Did that really happen? Or are people just making up that story? Did Ram just make up that story because he loves you and he wants you back? And Ram could not deal with that, and that is why you have been banished. And I'm going to read to you from Sita's words at that time, her point of view. And she said, first she says, what is this? Just because a few people are talking, is Ram going to listen to them? He knows that I'm innocent. But Lakshman says, you know, Ram, the duty of kingship is his primary duty. And no matter what he's feeling, he has to do what is right for him as a king. And she said, and this, I'll read the next part. And this is in Sita's voice. Rage had receded from me. My teeth were chattering. I felt cold and defeated. But why didn't he tell me any of this, I said. Why didn't he explain what was going on? I would have understood. I would have been angry, yes, but I would also have sympathized with him. Don't I know how important his reputation as king is to him? Together, we might have come up with a better plan. And even if we couldn't have come up with a solution, at least I would have been part of the decision, not a victim of it. But he didn't trust me, Lakshman, my husband, whom I trusted from the very moment my father put my hand in his. My husband, whom I believed in through the darkest nights of my despair in Lanka. My husband, whom I forgave even after his harsh words on the battlefield in Lanka gave me no choice but to throw myself into a fire. My husband, to whom the gods themselves proclaimed my innocence, that husband has now discarded me like an old sandal. You go back and tell him this, Lakshman. He sentenced me to banishment because people were whispering that I might have betrayed him. But he's the real betrayer. Who's going to sentence him? I turned and started pushing my way blindly through the bushes, not sure where I was going. Behind me, I could hear Lakshman calling out frantically, urging me to stop. But that only made me hurry. Brambles tore at me. I didn't care. When I'd stepped into the fire in Lanka, I'd believed that nothing could hurt me worse, body or soul. How wrong I'd been. The pain was so excruciating that if it hadn't been for the babies, I would have thrown myself into the Yamuna and ended the burning. My babies, the most innocent, the most wronged. I could feel them inside me, trembling, clutching at each other, sensing that something terrible had happened. Don't be afraid, little ones, I whispered, pushing my way determinedly into the dark, even though I had no idea of what it held. Hot tears scalded my cheeks. I'm going to live for you. I'm going to guard you with my last breath. I'm going to love you enough for mother and father both, so you feel no lack. I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to be princes. But more than that, I'll teach you what you need to know to be good human beings, so that you'll never do to a woman what your father has done to me. So I just wanted to say
I just wanted to say first, thank you both, because the juxtaposition of these two passages was so telling. Thank you. Go ahead.
And I wanted to say that I wanted to show that Sita has a lot more agency than, traditionally we have given her in the retellings, in the popular movies, etc. She may not have a lot of choices, but she takes the best one and she does the best thing with it. And this moment for me was particularly moving because she doesn't give up. She decides what is her duty now, and she's going to do it. She's going to do it with great grace and courage, and she's going to do it with great dignity because she's going to bring up these children by herself. She's going to use the entire forest community. She's going to draw on whatever she needs to bring up these children, but she never ever will badmouth Ram. And I think that is her greatness, that she can rise above what a lot of us may not have been able to rise above. That is her strength.
So, both these epics, like epics of ancient times, are about war, but they are also about love. And both the elements of war and the elements of love remain true even through the passage of thousands of years. And here I just want to acknowledge that in my Radha anthology, Andrew Schelling is sitting here, and he has done one of the most beautiful translations of an early version of a song of Radha under Vidya. So there is so much from around the world that has contributed to our understanding of these two epics. I just had two questions to ask you, and then after that we'll open up to the audience. But 10 minutes is for us to talk, right? Yeah. So I'm going to ask you two questions in one, and you can sort of go on to expand on whichever aspects of these questions seem pertinent to you. Radha was absolutely her own person through her life. Sita was perhaps the first single mother in history recorded in an epic of that scale. Do you think Indian and South Asian interpretations of feminism are different from those in America, as the pressures and compulsions of the two cultures are so different? That's one question. The other question is, why do you think so many of the world's religions lack a powerful goddess figure? Or to put it differently, why and how does Hinduism carry such a strong, persistent reverences for its many and multiple goddesses? So, whichever you want to take on.
Okay. How about this? You answer the difficult one and I'll take the easy.
Well,
or you can give a completely different
no, you know
reply.
what? If you,
Pick
the
up
one
on
I would
this.
prefer to answer has to do with the persistence of the feminine in Hinduism versus other religions.
So do it.
But because I can't really speak to South Asian
No, you can
feminism
drop
as
the
an American
feminism.
male.
As I said, these are
wanna-
just some cues,
Yeah.
some thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm not. It's not a question I'm giving
Right,
you.
right.
I'm just
And
giving
so-
you a prompt.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about the way in which Sita's life is relevant to our struggles as women today, both in India but really all over the world. And I talked about this a little bit in the morning, that some of the moments in Sita's life that are really powerful for me are where she pushes for autonomy and she pushes to do what she feels is the right thing for her and also the fun thing for her. So the first thing that she does, which again through popular interpretation has been shown as completely different, is when she goes to the forest with Ram. Now, if you've ever seen these paintings of Ram, Sita, and Lakshman going to the forest, you'll see Ram is in the beginning, in the front, Sita's in the middle, very demure and veiled, and Lakshman is in the back, kind of protecting her. But when you'll see in my book, and that is based really on Valmiki, that nobody wanted Sita to go to the forest. It's not like she went, fulfilling her duty as wife. They all were like, you stay in the palace, that's your place. And while you're there, just take care of the in-laws. And she was like, no, I want the adventure. I want this romantic journey with you. I'm going no matter what. She fights for it. Okay, so I think that's one. And I think we have a lot of women have told me that when they read that, they remembered the moment that when they came to the United States, which was like going into a foreign space, a space that they did not know. And they really resonated with Radha Sita going along with the man she loved into a world that she did not know, but she had great hopes, expectations, and adventure, right? So that's one. And when Ram says to her, after having won the battle in Lanka, now you go where you want, I can't take you back, she stands up and says something which I think is very, very current. She says, you are shaming me for being a victim of abduction. That was not my fault. Okay? The victim of violence should not be shamed. And with the work that I do with women who have been survivors of domestic violence, I see this so often, that they are shamed for what was not their fault, what is not their fault. So a lot of times women who are in positions of being victims of abduction, of trafficking, of all of that, society has made them feel that it's their fault. But Sita, a long time back, stands up and says, it is not my fault, it is not the fault of anyone who was a victim of someone else's violence. That is so contemporary.
So, indeed, when I first... So when I worked on the anthology on Sita, which impacted so many other books after that, one of the things we worked on was the recreation of Sita into a victim by popular television serials and films. And we went a little deeper, as she did, and found that Sita was certainly not a victim, but a figure of strength and empowerment for generations of Indian women. And that's really the glory of the epics, that they keep in cycles getting interpreted and reinterpreted. So, Amit, the second question to you, why do the world's religions lack goddess figures?
Well, the first point is that they don't entirely lack it. So if you look at the tradition of Mary in Catholicism, right? Kuan Yin in the Far East, and of course our goddesses. The main point is that it's something precious and something that we need to, as Hindus and as people who are rewriting and engaging with this living body of myth and history, it's something that we need to preserve, emphasize, and treasure going forward. And I think our books and all the work we do is all, and work you've done, your anthology, that's all part of that process. Because if you look at, say, because in different religious traditions, the feminine is suppressed to different degrees. And so if you remember the fatwa against Rushdie had to do with the satanic verses. Those satanic verses actually referred to some pre-Islamic Arabian goddesses who were briefly authorized, the worship of whom was briefly authorized and then edited out, right? And that is a perfect, a very eloquent example of the censoring of the feminine. Right? And also within Protestantism, in Protestant Christianity, the reverence of Mary has been de-emphasized, right? But it still is alive and kicking within Catholicism. It's alive and kicking most vigorously to this day in the Hindu tradition. And I'm proud of that. And I think that that's something that, you know, it's on us to continue that and to treasure it.
So what in the figure of Sita reached out to you to interpret her in your book?
You know, I think that just as Chitra mentioned, Sita is a character who has many different layers, and she has, there's kind of a gulf between how the sort of pop cultural notion of her and then how she is and how she behaves in the moment and in these very, very fraught situations. And I think that in my telling of Sita's story, at the very end, when Rama and Ravana is the demon king who kidnapped Sita, when they're having their final battle, I have Ravana basically pinning Rama down. And I have Sita rushing to Rama's rescue, divided by the wall of her captivity. And she infuses him with her Shakti through the ground, because she is a figure of the earth, right? And she infuses him with her Shakti through the ground. And it is she who gives him the power to throw off Ravana and defeat Ravana. And this is something that was not necessarily in the ancient tellings of the epics, but it was something that I wanted to introduce as an because remember, poets who retell the Ramayana are always introducing little touches of their own. And I wanted that to be the touch that I introduced, because I wanted to preserve the notion within the Hindu tradition of the goddess being the active principle. The
Beautiful.
Male is passive, and the goddess is the Shakti, and which means literally power.
Absolutely. So would you like to add to that? Your last words before we open our...
Yes. So I also wanted to point to something which maybe brings Sita a little closer to Radha. One of the things that I felt has been problematic with the interpretation, the popular interpretation of Sita, is that she is always good and that she is goddess-like with no faults of her own. And when people then tell their daughters, be like Sita, they're putting this kind of impossible ideal in front of young women, but they're also saying it's not okay for you to be a woman who has shortcomings, who has flaws, who has faults. Those are not acceptable. And in the original Valmiki and Kritivas and all of those, and in my book, I want to show Sita because she's occupying that space as an avatar, a god who has come down to earth. She's between humans and gods. And I show her in her failings, she loses her temper. You know, she has to plot with her sister when the mother-in-laws are giving them a hard time. When she wants the golden deer, you know, she puts a lot of pressure on Ram. They're in the forest, there's this beautiful deer. Ram says, I don't like the look of that deer. Something's weird about that deer. She's like, no, you know, I've been putting up with a lot these 13 years, and this is the one thing I'm asking you for, and you're saying no. So she makes Ram go. Then she hears Ram's voice crying for help, and that is, of course, you know, that is the demons doing. And she says to Lakshman, please go help your brother. And Lakshman says, look, I know it's not Ram, but she is very distressed. And she says all kinds of things to Lakshman to make him go. She says, I know you've been eyeing me. You want Ram to die so that you can marry me, isn't it? Until she forces him to go. Okay? So these are human parts of her. And I wanted to say, yes, she's wonderful. We look up to her, but she can be human, and so can we as women. It's okay.
Thank you. So, on that note, open up to the audiences. Which way will the mic go easier? Let's go 1, 2, 3. Okay. So where does it go first? Very brief, please, because there are a lot of questions coming up.
Thank you. I think that was very wonderful. For me, Sita and Radha are both same, are both Shaktis. And in Ramayana, Sita, her portrayal, what she did, was to show the society that she has to follow her husband. And at a time where she could have gone against Ravana because she's Shakti, but she says, no, I'm going to wait for my husband to come because he needs to take care of this responsibility. So for me, Radha, Sita are both one and both are Shaktis.
Wonderful and true. But questions, not comments, please. But this was and I'm sure both of you agree with that thoughtful point of view. Because I want to bring in at least 5 questions if we can, because there are at least 10 hands up here. Could we have the lady in front, please? We'll just move around like that. Loud and clear.
First one to Chitra ji. This morning and today also, in this session, you mentioned that it was Sita's choice to do the Agni Pariksha because she was victimized and people were blaming her. Nowadays, we have seen many cases. Many women, girls, they are victimized. Are you, and God or historical hero are very our role model, so we follow them. So are you expecting nowadays the ladies or girls should follow that rule?
That's a very good question. Is Sita agreeing to Agni Pariksha in the field in Lanka, right? Sita is not. Ram has not asked her for Agni Pariksha. This is a big mistake in popular recent retellings and movies. He says, you go where you want. You go stay with Sugriv. You go stay with, you go stay with Vibhishan. I'm done with you. And she says, if you're done with me, you have no right to tell me what to do. It's my life. I choose to end it honorably in fire. No pariksha. This is not a test. She says, this is my heroic action to end my life. then, so it's very wrong to think of it as Agni Pariksha. The god of fire comes out on his own and he says, she is pure. Okay? She has not agreed to Agni Pariksha. Later when Ram will say, please come back, he's seen his children, he loves his children, he wants his family together. Please come back. Only one thing, please do Agni Pariksha. Go into the fire in front of everybody so they can see you're pure. And she says, no. She clearly says no. She has everything to lose. She's going to lose her children, her last chance at love. She says, it's not right. I will not do it. And my Sita says, I don't ever want later generations of my daughters to have to do it. And that's why I'm not going to do it.
Thank you.
It's very
There was a
strong.
question
She's
there.
very strong.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Myth is open to rewrites and reinterpretation every single day. That was new information for me. The other two traditions I know that do that are fairy tales and fan fiction. How is myth different from those traditions?
Say the last bit again, we couldn't hear that clearly.
The other traditions that I know that people rewrite continually is fairy tales and fan fiction. How is Indian myth, what separates it from those types of genres?
I'll quickly give my reaction and then I'd like both of you to do it. I think one of the reasons is that it began, a lot of it, with an oral tradition. So when an oral tradition is told and retold, naturally, it takes on the moment and the teller. And then after that, once it went into translations, because all these epics go into each and every region of India, and at least 20 to 25 languages for each of them, for both the myths, both the great epics. Then when they were told in those languages, which were the sacred texts for those groups of people, then in the process of translation, they took on so much that was local. And so people always had the freedom to retell them and to reinterpret them. I don't think they changed the main facts as such, but how they were nuanced, as both of these have done. Now you can answer that question.
And remember, fan fiction, say, like 50 Shades of Grey came from like Twilight fan fiction, right? But there's a big difference between that type of storytelling and storytelling in which every character interpenetrates with the world beyond us, right? Because the mythic world, and remember, Hinduism is the last surviving mythological religion. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, these are what's known as historical religions. Hinduism is a mythological religion. So there are supernatural things that happen. There are talking monkeys in the Ramayana, right? But this is all, yes, that's why kids love it. That's one of the reasons why kids love it. There's like a cartoon series about Hanuman. But Rama is not just Rama. He's also Vishnu. He's also Brahman. He's also the highest divinity, right? And Sita in the same way. She's not just Sita. She's also the goddess. And when you have characters in which the divine interpenetrates with the world of affairs, that's something profoundly different than fan fiction and the sort of things that like genre fiction and that kind of thing. It's something.
These are sacred texts.
Yeah, in the end, they are sacred texts.
More than a billion people treat them as living faith.
Yes. And I think you both said it very well. And I just wanted to say, I think with every major rewriting of the epics, we see that the new writer has taken the old ideas and thought deeply about what it means in the cosmic sense, in the social sense. So there's a lot of interpretation of these actions, which relate to their time. So the Kritibasi Ramayana, written many, many centuries later, is talking also about what's going on in society at that time and connecting it to these epics. But they're done with a sense of at once reverence, but also ownership. In saying that I love this story and I respect this story, the writer is saying this is my own story, therefore I can put my own spin on it.
So in a way, it adds to a constant sense of renewal. So these stories are relevant and real to the people who retell them. If we were going by a 500-year-old text, it may sound dated and odd. But if it's constantly, as these two people in a faraway continent have done, taken them back and given them a new understanding, So I think there's a question right next to.
Right, and what is alive continues to grow and change.
Yes.
If it died, we would have one text, and it would be 1,000 years old, and that would be it. But because it's constantly renewing, constantly growing, constantly changing, it's alive.
So your question, please.
Yeah, I was just curious as to kind of your guys' your thoughts on the relationship between the rejection of the feminine and the rejection of the earth.
Yes, Chitra, would you like to take that?
Yeah. My book, which is called The Forest of Enchantments, here, Sita, I see her as, which is in the original story, she's a daughter of the earth. She comes out of the earth, and she has a deep connection to the earth and the natural world. She is a healer as well. So yes, definitely. And there is a scene over here where Sita is coming. She's gotten married in Mithila. She's now being brought by palanquin along with the army to Ayodhya, which will be her new home. And she sees the soldiers going through the forest, just slashing away at all the undergrowth and all the leaves. And she feels the pain of the earth, and she actually stops them.
So there is indeed a deep understanding in India today of the combination of ecology, earth, and all
the
these
sacred
things.
feminine. Right?
And throughout multiple religious traditions, the earth is consistently female. The earth is consistently female. Ancient Sumeria, India, more than one tradition.
Now, a question from somewhere there. Yeah, please.
Okay, so here's a question. So this is more to you guys as writers. As you've kind of submerged yourselves in these characters, right? I mean, to all three of you. And you start looking at Sita or Radha in a very modern context and start looking at them through that modern lens or modern sensibility. How does it impact you guys as writers? I mean, what kind of aftermath is there once you come out of this project?
Can I begin there? Because I'm going to take a different text from them. Many years ago, I was asked to do this version of the Mahabharata. And rashly, they said, give it to us in 6 months. It was for young and first-time readers. And I said, yes. And then when I got down to reading the Mahabharata, for 2 years I couldn't write anything because whatever it says, whatever is worth writing has been written in the Mahabharata. It silenced me. And after that, those characters have entered all my other books in some form or the other. The characters in the Mahabharata have informed each and every novel of mine, though they may be in different situations. Would you?
I could go next. So, yes, this book took me a long time to write because I was really making an effort to understand Sita, understand her beyond the popular retellings, understand her beyond the elders telling me, be meek and mild like Sita. And as I really began to discover her character for myself, it touched me very deeply. And I realized that her strength is a very different kind of strength. And I think I myself had to mature to appreciate that strength. It's not the strength that just goes against something and destroys it. It is the strength that says, we can coexist, but this is a better way to do it. So it is the kind of strength that learns how to bring people together and to do things out of love, learns what is possible and never dwells in bitterness. So since writing this novel, I find myself often saying, WWSD. What would Sita do? When I'm faced with difficult decisions, I really do feel her spirit kind of inspiring me.
For me, as an artist, as a writer, I want to share something I love by creating a thing of beauty. And when I finished this novel, what I mostly felt was gratitude. Gratitude that I was, that this is part of my inheritance. And that this is something that I was able to do and able to immerse myself in. And it puts me back in touch with my deep history, ancestrally and religiously. And above all, I'm just grateful to have been able to, write the book and also discuss it with lovely people like you.
Wonderful. Are we through, or is there time for one more question? Okay, so we are through.
Please thank
Can I just say one thing? Questions can continue when you come to our book signing. So if you had a burning question, come talk to us outside.